These are America's deadliest roads and the worst killer in each state. Driving in America can be deadly. I'm Bob from Get Details. Get ready for some gruesome crashes that defy description. With more than 4.2 million miles of roads in America and 279 million vehicles, close to 40,000 people die in motor vehicle crashes every year. Let's start with Alabama. I-65 is Hank Williams Sr.'s lost highway, but it's also the least favored road in the heart of Dixie, slicing Alabama in half north to south, 366 miles. It ranks number 6 nationally on the least favored highways. We'll call that the hate list. I-65 in Alabama sees an average of 33 fatal crashes every year. Honorable mention goes to US 280 and I-85 near Montgomery. Next, we stock up on fuel and snacks and drive 10 hours a day for the next week, and we'll arrive at Alaska's most deadly highway, the Parks Highway, Alaska Route 3. It runs 323 miles just north of Anchorage to Fairbanks, the last frontier's 2 largest metros. It's also the main road to reach Denali National Park. Alaska's Route 3 has an average of 4 fatalities a year. Other dangerous Alaskan roads include the Glen Highway and the Seward Highway. Now let's leave the snow behind and head to Arizona. And the first time we hear the name, I-40, but far from the last. Running east and west, the super slab cuts across 359 miles across the Grand Canyon State between New Mexico and California. There's an average of 35 fatal crashes on this freeway every year. Also on the hate list is I-17 in Arizona between Phoenix and Flagstaff. Next alphabetically is Arkansas, an area that often deals with devastation after storms and the destruction on the highway, specifically US 65, which travels north and south from Louisiana to Missouri, running right smack dab through Little Rock. This stretch of highway in the natural state has an average of 14 fatal accidents every year. Other roads that'll make you cuss include I-40 and I-30. The Golden State of California is known for its freeways and car culture, and it has more than its share of problem roadways. Number 1 most deadly on that list would be I-40. This is a major east-west artery for the United States running from Barstow, California, all the way back to Wilmington, North Carolina. 155 of those miles are in California, in the Mojave Desert. An average of 11 people die on California's Needles Freeway every year. Other dangerous highways on California's hate list include I-5 and US 101. The Mile High State, Colorado, is accustomed to snowy weather, so that normally isn't as big a factor as it is in other states. The most deadly road in the state is US 160, running east and west 490 miles from New Mexico to Kansas. This stretch of highway in southern Colorado sees an average of more than 11 fatal accidents every year. Also highly unpopular is I-25 around Denver. So, how does speed factor into all this? Are higher speed limits responsible for more crashes? Well, it's not easy to draw a parallel, as you can see by this map. This is Get Details, and these are America's deadliest highways and the worst killer in each state. Now on the East Coast, we coast into Connecticut. Where else but I-95? It's a least than favored road up and down the eastern seaboard. Headed generally east and west, I-95 bisects the Constitution State for only 111 miles between New York and Rhode Island. It may be a short section, but it accounts for over 16 deaths a year. Also on the Connecticut hate list is I-84 around Hartford. A little further south is tucked in Delaware. Not very large, only 1,949 square miles. Delaware has a dense network of roads, about 5,386 miles. Of all those miles, the deadliest belong to US 13. It traverses the entire state, 103 miles between Maryland and Pennsylvania. It connects most of the important towns in the first state, including Seaford, Dover, and Wilmington. An average of 11 people die on US 13 in Delaware every year. And there are two other highways on the Delaware hate list, including I-95 and Delaware State Route 1. The Sunshine State shines in a lot of statistics, and unfortunately, highway fatalities is one of them. Florida is home to the most deadly highway on this list today, US 1. Starting at the Georgia state line, US 1 straddles the state's east coast between Jacksonville and Miami, and then finally on to Key West. Nearly 108 people die on this highway every year. That's the highest average fatalities per year of any highway in the nation. Other Florida roads on the hate list include I-95, of course, and I-4, especially around Orlando. Moving up the coast, next is the Peach State, Georgia. Georgia State Route 11 runs for 376 miles. It's the longest highway in the Peach State. It touches part of 20 Georgia counties. It was a close race, though, between Georgia 11 and 400. But Georgia 11 was slightly deadlier, with an average of 14 highway deaths a year. Other dishonorable mentions go to I-85 and 285 in Atlanta. The Aloha State is unique along with Alaska among American states that it has no real interstate. But it does have freeways and highways, and that means fatalities. Close to 100 a year for all the islands combined. The deadliest road in Hawaii is Route 11 on the southern part of Hawaii's Big Island. It sees an average of 8 deaths a year. Also on the hate list for Hawaii would be on Maui, the H1 and H2 freeways near Honolulu. In Idaho, weather is always a factor. A major highway can be quickly shut down by a heavy winter blizzard. In the Gem State, the most deadly highway is US 95. It roams 538 miles north and south from Oregon to British Columbia on the Canadian border. On average, more than 16 people die on US 95 every year. Also, keep an eye out for I-84, especially around Boise. There were 42,514 deaths from motor vehicle crashes in the United States in 2022. This corresponds to 12.8 deaths per 100,000 people and 1.33 deaths per 100 million miles traveled. The fatality rate per 100,000 people ranged from 4.8 in Rhode Island to 23.9 in Mississippi. The death rate per 100 million miles traveled ranged from 0.69 in Rhode Island to 1.85 in South Carolina. This is Get Details, and these are America's deadliest highways and the worst killer in each state. Now, in the land of Lincoln, home of one of America's largest cities, Illinois has over 8.3 million licensed drivers, and an uncertain number of those driving unlicensed. The most deadly highway in Illinois is US 45, which traverses 429 miles. The entire length of the state, from Wisconsin to Kentucky. On average, more than 11 people die on US 45 each year. Also high on the hate list are the Dan Ryan and Kennedy Expressways and I-55, all in the Chicagoland area. Now let's move just a little south to the bottom of Lake Michigan and enter the Hoosier State. In Indiana, the deadliest killer is US 41. It runs about 280 miles north and south from the Chicago metro area to Evansville, the Ohio River, and the Kentucky state line. This rural highway sees an average of 11 fatalities every year. The other major road to watch out for is I-465 around Indianapolis. Now, another mostly rural state is Iowa. The big killer in the Hawkeye State is Interstate 80, which travels east to west 306 miles between Illinois and Nebraska, touching the metro areas of Des Moines and Omaha. Between the endless rows of corn on both sides of the highway, an average of 19 people die on I-80 in Iowa every year. The other major killer is I-35, especially where it intersects with I-80 in urban Des Moines. Not far away in Kansas, another wide-open, mostly rural state at over 82,000 square miles, which makes it 15th largest. The worst killer in the Sunflower State is Interstate 70, running 424 miles east to west between Missouri and Colorado. This sometimes desolate highway sees an average of 16 traffic fatalities a year. The other major Kansas trouble spot is I-35 through the Kansas City area. The bluegrass state of Kentucky is lovely to look at, but it can be deadly to drive in. Like US 62, the worst killer in Kentucky, running northeast to southwest, all the way across the Commonwealth from the Ohio River to the Mississippi River and the Illinois and Missouri state lines. About 12 people are killed on Kentucky's US Route 62 every year. Also high on the hate list are I-75 around Lexington and Cincinnati, and I-64 near Louisville. Now we're headed to the swamps and bayous of Louisiana. US 90 is the most deadly in the Pelican State. It's a major east-west route in the southern part of the state, covering 298 miles between Mississippi and Texas, connecting New Orleans, Morgan City, Lafayette, and Lake Charles. It's one of the more deadly highways on our list, with an average of 30 fatalities every year. Also, watch out for I-210 in the Lake Charles area and I-10 in Baton Rouge and New Orleans. North Dakota had the highest percentage of SUV and pickup occupant deaths, but the lowest percentage of car occupant deaths. Mississippi, Indiana, and North Carolina are all tied for having the highest percentage of car occupant deaths. Hawaii reports relatively low proportions of deaths on all motor vehicles, but a high percentage of pedestrian deaths and motorcycle deaths as well. The District of Columbia had the highest percentage of crash deaths involving bicyclists and the highest percentage involving pedestrians. This is Get Details, and these are America's deadliest highways and the worst killer in each state. Now, let's travel down east to the top of the eastern seaboard and the state of Maine. The worst killer in the Pine Tree State is US 1, notorious up and down the east coast from Canada to Key West. It covers about 526 miles in Maine, from the Canadian border all along the coast until it finally hits the New Hampshire border. Every year, nearly 10 people die on this coastal highway, and I-95 is the state's other risky route. Next up, Maryland, the Old Line State. And I'm noticing a trend here. The deadliest highway in the state, once again, US 1. Maryland is not a large state, and the route of US 1 only covers about 81 miles between the Pennsylvania state line and the nation's capital. But that proximity to Washington is the reason this section of US 1 has about 14 deaths every year. Other Maryland hotspots include I-495, I-695, and I-270. Massachusetts is a small state, only about 10,555 square miles, but it has almost 5 million licensed drivers, and a dangerous road called Interstate 495. This is a major ring route around Boston that runs in a crescent around the western edge of the city, north to south, about 118 miles. An average of 10 people are killed every year on this highway, the worst in the Bay State. Also high on the hate list are I-93 and, naturally, I-95. Headed to the Midwest now and the beautiful state of Michigan, the worst killer in the Great Lakes state is US 31. It can be very icy in winter as it follows the eastern coast of Lake Michigan, north and south, 355 miles, from the Indiana state line all the way to Mackinac City. At least 12 people die on US 31, especially in the winter. Also high on the Michigan hate list is I-75 and I-96, especially around Grand Rapids. Another winter wonderland that can turn deadly on the roads is Minnesota and US Route 169. It's a major north-south artery that runs about 360 miles just south of Canada to the Iowa state line at Elmore. As Minnesota's deadliest, it sees about 8 fatalities a year. Other roads to be aware of include I-35W and I-94, both in the Twin Cities area. Nationwide, over half of all motor vehicle crashes occurred in single vehicle crashes. Rhode Island has the highest percentage of deaths in single vehicle crashes, while Nebraska has the highest percentage of deaths in multiple vehicle crashes. This is Get Details, and these are America's deadliest highways and the worst killer in each state. Way down south in Mississippi, the deadliest strip of asphalt is the Blues Highway, US 61. It's been called the longest road in the world, but it's only 324 miles up through Natchez, Vicksburg, and finally the Tennessee state line just south of Memphis. Every year, the Magnolia State sees about 14 deaths on the Blues Highway. Other roads in Mississippi to be aware of include I-10 near the Gulf in Biloxi and I-20 around Jackson. In the Show Me State, it's US 63 that claims the most lives. It goes 337 miles, mostly north and south between Arkansas and Iowa. About 18 people die on this highway every year. Other roads high on the hate list include I-70 between Kansas City and St. Louis and Interstate 64 and 44 around St. Louis. Now, let's head to Big Sky Country and Deadly US 2 in Montana. This is more than just a major tourism route through Glacier National Park. It's a major route 667 miles long from North Dakota to Idaho, just south of the Canadian border. And it's the only route in a lot of places. An average of 15 people die on this highway every year. The other major headache in Montana is US 93 between Kalispell and Missoula. One thing you notice when you head west, the states get a lot larger. Nevada is huge. It's the 7th largest state at 110,577 square miles. And it's mostly empty, so you can drive a long way between towns, especially on the state's most deadly, Interstate 80, flowing east and west for 454 miles from Utah to California. It includes the towns of Elko and Reno and crosses the 40-mile desert. An average of 24 people lose their lives on this highway every year. Also high on the hate list are I-15 and US 95 in the Las Vegas area. Now, back east. The very first states were much more compact, such as New Hampshire, with 9,349 square miles. The most deadly road in the Granite State is Interstate 93. That runs mostly due north and south from Massachusetts to Vermont. It includes the cities of Concord and Manchester. An average of 6 people die on this highway every year. The other worrisome road is I-95, around Portsmouth on the New Hampshire coast. Daytime observational surveys show 92% of people use seatbelts. Oregon has the highest seatbelt usage, 97%. While Virginia and Nebraska are tied for lowest, 76%. This is Get Details, and these are America's deadliest highways and the worst killer in each state.
Mike, you okay?
Now, let's stop in the Garden State. New Jersey is home to some really big traffic problems on both the east and west sides of the state, thanks to being between Philadelphia and New York City. The biggest killer in New Jersey is US 130. It runs east and west a little over 48 miles from the Delaware River near Philadelphia to Atlantic City. An average of more than 12 people a year die on this highway. Other Jersey jams include the Garden State Parkway, I-80 near New York City, and I-95. In the vast Southwest, the land of enchantment is New Mexico. It's beautiful, but sometimes dangerous, especially on the state's most deadly highway, I-40. It's a major 374-mile east-west artery across the heart of the state, between Texas and Arizona, passing through Albuquerque. It's an especially lethal stretch of I-40 that often tops 40 fatalities every year, which puts it near the top of this list. And I-25 near Santa Fe is another road high on the hate list. Back now to the East Coast and the Empire State. New York has a well-developed transportation network, but there's one road in particular that is more deadly than all the others, I-84. Now, it's not a long stretch, only 71 miles, but it carries a lot of traffic. An average of 19 people are killed on I-84 every year. Other New York roadways on the danger list include the New York Thruway, the Long Island Expressway, and I-95. You may not remember now, but when we discussed Delaware, I commented on how dense their road network is. But it isn't the most dense. That distinction belongs to North Carolina, with a road density of 72 miles per 100 square miles. One of those roads is more deadly than all the others. I-95, a major north-south route through the eastern part of the Tar Heel State. It runs 181 miles between Virginia and South Carolina. It's one of the more deadly roads on this list, with approximately 24 people killed every year. Other roads on the North Carolina hate list include I-40 around Raleigh and Chapel Hill. Also, I-77 and I-85 around Charlotte. Up in North Dakota, weather can be a big factor in travel safety, especially on the most deadly road in the state, U.S. Route 2. If you remember, it was also the deadliest road in Montana. Same road. 358 miles from east to west between Minnesota and Montana. On average, about 10 people die on this road every year. The other road that can be deadly in this Dakota is I-94, especially around Fargo and Bismarck. Now, in the Midwest, Ohio is crisscrossed by major highways connecting its important cities like Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati. The most dangerous road in the Buckeye State is the highway that connects all three, I-71. It runs about 240 miles from northeast to southwest. More than 19 people are killed on this road every single year. Also high on the Ohio hit list are I-70 in Columbus and I-75 around Cincinnati. Nationwide, 41% of motor vehicle crash deaths occur in rural areas. The states with the highest percentage of crash deaths on rural roads are Wyoming, Maine, North Dakota, and Vermont. The states with the lowest percentage were Maryland, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. This is Get Details, and these are America's deadliest highways and the worst killer in each state. Out west in Oklahoma, they love their cars and pickup trucks, and they do a lot of driving. One road that you might need to know, though, is US 69, the biggest killer in the Sooner State. It traverses the entire 260 miles north to south between Kansas and Texas, including the towns of Muskogee and Bug Tussle. More than 15 people die on this highway each year. Other Oklahoma hotspots include I-35 and our old pal I-40 near Oklahoma City. Drivers in Oregon are relatively safe compared to the rest of the nation, but one highway is the most deadly. That's US 101, known as Oregon Coast Highway number 9. It runs 363 miles along the Pacific coast in a mountainous region that's prone to closure by landslides. An average of 14 people die every year on this stretch of US 101. Other spots to be aware of in Oregon include US 26 and I-5.
Oh, watch out, watch out! Oh!
Back on the east side now, we're in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. With over 9 million drivers, the Keystone State highways can be jammed for hours at a time. But the most deadly offender is not in one of the major cities. It's mostly rural I-80. It winds 311 miles between Ohio and New Jersey. About 12 people a year die on this stretch of highway. Also on the PA hate list are I-376 around Pittsburgh and I-95. It doesn't take too long to get from one side of Rhode Island to the other. About 45 minutes if there are no wrecks. But that's not normally the case. I-95 is the state's deadliest road, running about 48 miles between Connecticut on the west to Massachusetts. There are about 5 fatalities on this freeway every year. Other roads on the hit list in the smallest state are I-295 and the Huntington Expressway. Now, down to South Carolina, where we find good old I-95 doing what it does best. The state's deadliest roadway runs 199 miles north and south between North Carolina and Georgia, and it's a major route between New York and Florida. So traffic is always very heavy. About 30 people are killed on this roadway every year. Also on the SC hate list are I-85 between Greenville and Spartanburg and I-26 in Columbia. Distances are wide in the Mount Rushmore state. Not many large cities in South Dakota. All that open space may be the reason US 18 is their deadliest killer. It runs east and west 451 miles between Minnesota and Wyoming. It has an average of 6 fatalities every year. Also, watch out for I-29 in the Sioux Falls area and I-90 near Sturgis. Nationally, consuming alcohol factored into thousands of crashes. How many is not exactly certain because some states report differently than others. Among the states that had the most significant stringent reporting, Hawaii had the highest estimated percentage of fatally injured drivers with blood alcohol levels of 0.08 or higher, while Utah had the lowest. This is Get Details, and these are America's deadliest highways and the worst killer in each state. Two things I really love in Tennessee: music and driving. From rock and roll and blues in Memphis to country in Nashville and bluegrass around Knoxville. And one highway connects all the dots for the volunteer state. It's also their biggest killer, stretching 455 miles from North Carolina to the Mississippi River. And along the way, it becomes America's second most deadly byway, with approximately 52 people being killed every year. That's about one per week. Other roads on the Tennessee hate list include I-24 in Nashville and Chattanooga and I-65. Of course, you know there are a lot of wide open spaces in the Lone Star State. But at 906 miles, US 83 is the longest numbered highway in Texas and the entire nation. And it's the state's biggest killer. US 83 starts at the Oklahoma Panhandle and then drives straight south through the heart of Texas and includes the cities of Abilene, Laredo, and Brownsville. Nearly 34 people die every year on this rural Texas highway. Other Texas hotspots include I-45 and 610 and I-35. Another oversized state is Utah. Oversized compared to the average, that is. It's 12th largest at almost 85,000 square miles. And right through the center of all that natural beauty is US 89. At 502 miles long, it's the state's longest, running north and south between Idaho and Arizona. About 13 fatalities occur on this road every year. Other trouble spots in the Beehive State include I-80 and I-15. In scenic Vermont, one of the best drives is US 7. It's also one of the worst. It's the state's most deadly. It's a scenic 176 miles from the Canadian border across the Green Mountain State to Massachusetts. An average of 6 people die every year on this highway in western Vermont. Other curvy and somewhat treacherous roads include Vermont routes 30 and 11. Virginia has some of the heaviest traffic in the nation near the major urban centers of Washington, Richmond, and Norfolk. The most deadly road in the Commonwealth is US 460, which winds its way across 406 miles from the Chesapeake Bay in Virginia Beach all the way to the West Virginia state line. 21 people on average die on this highway every year. Other roads on the Virginia trouble list include I-64 and I-95. The state of Washington has excellent roads, especially around Seattle. I-5, though, while being extra wide with 13 lanes in downtown Seattle, is the Evergreen State's deadliest highway. It stretches 276 miles north and south, from the Canadian border to the Oregon state line. The section through Seattle sees about 26 fatalities every year. In 2021, there was an estimated 6,102,936 police-reported vehicle accidents in the United States. Of these, 39,508 were fatal. That's an effective deadly car crash death rate of 0.7%. Or you could say car crashes in the U.S. have a 99.3% survivability rate. This is Get Details, and these are America's deadliest highways and the worst killer in each state. The country road that could take you home in West Virginia could be US 19. It travels through the mountains 253 miles north and south between Pennsylvania and Virginia. It's the mountain state's deadliest, with about 11 fatalities every year. Other West Virginia roads high on the hate list include I-77 and I-64. Next up, we head to the nation's dairyland, Wisconsin. Interstate 94 arcs across the state from Minnesota to Minneapolis to Madison and then on to Milwaukee. And finally, the Illinois state line. That's 340 miles. There are more than 13 fatalities annually. Other roads on the hate list include I-43 along Lake Michigan and I-90. And finally, we come to the wide open spaces of Wyoming, home to Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Parks. It's the state with the second highest average elevation right behind Colorado. Interstate 80 is its most deadly highway. It runs the entire width of the state, 402 miles, between Nebraska and Utah. Nearly 21 people die every year on that section of I-80. The other roads on the Wyoming hate list include US 191 and I-90. And there you go. This is Get Details. Thanks for watching America's Deadliest Highways and the Worst Killer in each state. Be sure to check out our other fact-filled videos on a variety of amazing subjects. And get details.